behind the war, some intellectuals and politicians would say it's a different agenda. It's not to establish democracy, not to establish stability, as much as to control the oil fields, number one. Number two, to establish a new world order for a sole polar power, which is the United States and the coalition, Britain with it.
Well, again, there are 2 points in there.
Yeah.
First of all, on the question of oil. Perhaps you could answer me this question. Who owns Egypt's oil and gas?
Egypt.
Right. Who develops Egypt's oil and gas?
Egypt.
And in partnership with a range of foreign countries.
Yeah.
The same is true in Saudi Arabia. It's Saudi Arabia's oil and gas, which is developed and produced by Saudi companies in cooperation with international companies. And what do you think is going to happen in Iraq? Nothing different. Exactly the same as happens in Egypt and Saudi Arabia, and all the proceeds, all the profits that are generated from Iraqi oil, once the costs of production and returns to those involved in it are met, will go to the Iraqi people. Now, what has happened in the last 20 years is that Iraq has been underinvested in because nobody has been willing to put large sums of money into that country. And since 1990, there have been sanctions against that as well. Secondly, much of Iraq's oil has only been allowed out under UN Security Council rules through the Oil for Food program. And Saddam has resisted using the Oil for Food program because he's actually wanted the proceeds of the oil not to spend for food and medicines and for the development of the Iraqi people, but for his palaces and for his weapons programs and to strengthen the Iraqi army, of the Iraqi military.
But this does not justify the United States now to be in control of the oil
I didn't say that was justifying it. Who says the United States is not? The United States is not in control of the oil revenues. The United Nations Secretary General is in control of the oil revenues. In fact, the United Nations Security Council has just passed a new resolution a week or two ago, giving the Secretary General greater powers over oil for food, and he has direct authority over the revenues from Iraqi oil sales, which we hope will resume fairly soon, in order that Iraq can buy the food and medicines it needs for its own people.
This idea of establishing a new world order.
I think the world order evolves over time. The world order in the year 2000 is different from the world order in the year 1900, which was different in the year 1800.
Now we're talking here about one sole polar power.
Yes. There have been times in the past when one country has been dominant in the world. My own country was very powerful in the 19th century.
We know that in Egypt.
Exactly. And I think Egypt benefited in some ways from Britain's presence here.
We benefited, but we were occupied. You were our occupiers.
This is true.
For so long.
So it just goes to show that occupation and benefit are not mutually exclusive.
No way! No way! No way!
But the new world order is evolving. I think one of the features of the world order after the Second World War, 1945 onwards, was that the Cold War froze in place existing systems.
Yeah.
And that where there was barbarity, when Stalin murdered millions of his own people, when the Chinese Revolution led to millions of people being killed, when there are terrible atrocities all around the world, there was nothing the rest of the world could do, world opinion could do to intervene. I think what we've seen since 1990, we first saw it in the Balkans, we've seen it occasionally in Africa, and now we've seen it in Iraq, is that where world opinion is so strong that an individual government in a country does not have total freedom to do whatever it wants to its own people or in its own country. There are increasing limits on what governments can do. Now, these are limits which are set by international treaty, or they're set within the United Nations system, or they're established norms by growing public opinion through NGOs and so on. Now,
United Nations.
Yeah.
But you went to war without the approval of the United Nations.
You say that. I think Resolution 1441 was approval by the United Nations to go to war. And that's certainly the view of our lawyers back in London. Yes, we
then
would
Bush
prefer the second.
said, even without the approval of the United Nations, I would go to war.
What he was meaning was a second UN resolution.
Yeah.
This has happened before in Kosovo. The Russians were at that stage supporting Milosevic and were deaf to the demands that the world should intervene on behalf of the Muslims in Kosovo. Now, we and the French and the Americans were united in the view that it was right to intervene in Kosovo to protect the Kosovar Muslims against the Serbs. And we did so without a UN resolution.
To intervene. Mr. Ambassador, I understand that you are defending the idea of one country playing the role of policing the world,
well,
being the policeman of the world?
I'm not defending it, but I'm not in denial about the fact that there is one country which represents about 32% is it 32%? It's about 30% of the world economy, that has military power, which is as great as the next 10 countries combined. We have to be realistic and recognise what exists in the world, and not put our heads in the sand and pretend the world is like we would like it to be rather than like it is. Now, you may admire America, and a lot of people do admire America and what America stands for: its freedom, its creativity, its prosperity, its multi-ethnic nature. And other people dislike America because it's big and strong and sometimes brash and sometimes a bit assertive. Now, but the fact is, what you can't do is pretend America doesn't exist or pretend that America doesn't have the power it is. We've got to recognize that American power for what it is, recognize that actually we could be a whole lot better off than having a different sort of power. What for example, if Stalin was the most powerful person in the world, or if Saddam Hussein was the most powerful person in the world, or Ariel Sharon was the most powerful person. Choose your person that you in Egypt would most dislike. The fact is, we have in America a country that stands up for values of freedom, openness, fairness, justice, and free markets, and where people of merit can rise. Now, that doesn't mean that everything America does is necessarily right or just, and there should be no constraints on America. Of course there should be constraints. But we have to recognize that America is as powerful a country as it actually is.
Does this justify a new world order, that a new redrawing of the world map?
What do you mean by redrawing? Well, those are two different things.
Yeah.
We're not trying to change boundaries. Sometimes boundaries change of their own volition, like when the Soviet Union collapsed.
It's going to happen in Iraq.
Like when
Is Iraq going to be divided into
we are totally committed.
three little
We are totally committed to the territorial integrity of Iraq.
Yeah.
I think there is a case, because Iraq is such a diverse country, diverse ethnically, diverse religiously, diverse in the regions, to have some form of federal structure. Now, how that federal structure should be put together, if there is going to be one, is a matter for the Iraqi people. There's a strong case for doing it on the basis of the 18 governorates of Iraq, and you have some bigger governorates like Baghdad or Basra and Mosul. You have some smaller ones, but they reflect some of them are majority Sunni, some are majority Shia, some are majority Kurd, and some are a mix of the three.
Is it going to be divided? Is it going to be kind of a federation government?
Well, as I say, I think a federation based on 18 governorates is an idea that's worth considering.
That's division.
Well, no, it's not a division. Germany is based on
fragmenting the country.
Germany is based on I think it's 16 different governorates. Australia is based on 6. United States is based on 50. Argentina is based on half a dozen. This doesn't mean that these aren't unified countries just because they're based on a federal structure.
So the federal structure, if it prevails, that means Saudi, as it said, Syria is next, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Egypt, and the idea of fragmenting all the world countries.
Who says that? I don't understand the argument at all.
According to religion and according to ethnic groups.
No. Hang on.
That will be a disaster.
Hang on. You're running away with yourself, Halla. What Iraq is a country with diversity. Now, there are two ways to manage a diverse country.
Whether Shiite or Sunnis, these are religious groups.
You're interrupting me.
Sorry.
Iraq is a diverse country.
Okay.
Now, there are two ways to manage a diverse country. Well, maybe three ways of running a diverse country. One is to do it like Saddam Hussein. You have one man at the center with all power who represses any change. We reject that.
Absolutely.
A second way is to do it like the Lebanese have done, which is to say, right, we have this diversity, so therefore we're going to have, I can't remember exactly how they do it in Lebanon, but you have a Christian president and a Sunni Muslim prime minister and a Shia Muslim speaker of the parliament, and you divide up all the jobs that way. So you freeze in place a certain reflection of the ethnicity of the country. That's one way of doing it. It's not entirely satisfactory, as the Lebanese experience has shown. A third way to do it is to allow a freer political structure, which allows a degree of local government, so that the people in Najaf, or the people in Kirkuk, or the people in Tikrit can manage their own affairs on a local level, manage their schools and their hospitals and their road networks and their mosques and their policemen. So it reflects local sensitivities within the context of a unified Iraq, which is what we strongly support, and we will not allow this present crisis to lead to the breakup of Iraq. Now, the sort of wild imaginations you were just going into about this suddenly leading to all countries in the Arab world being split up.
It's not my imagination.
It's just what you've been saying.
It's proposed all over the place, and people
I've never
say
seen this proposed.
Arab countries are next. It's in order. Syria's coming next. Iran, Saudi Arabia.
Well, I think you're confusing two things, if I may, Halla. I think you're confusing the fact that one tyrannical regime has been toppled, and therefore other regimes which are not fully democratic might also be in the firing line. Can I say absolutely clearly to you? Can I say absolutely? No, let me say it. I can say absolutely clearly to you that there is no intention whatsoever and no plans whatsoever for military action against Syria.
So why is the threat?
What threat?
Immediate threat against Syria now?
Well,
if Syria does not abide, if Syria is harboring Iraqi officials or terrorists,
then what?
If Syria is having, all of a sudden Syria is having biological weapons, this is amazing. I mean, the war in Iraq is not finished, and we started hearing about threats to Syria.
Well, perhaps there are genuine concerns about Syria. And there are genuine concerns that, first of all, Syria, alone amongst the Arab countries, broke United Nations sanctions to provide military help to the Iraqis. It channeled Arab volunteers to go and help Saddam Hussein, who I'm afraid were very misguided, because what Saddam Hussein did with these Arab volunteers, they just pushed them in the front line, and they suffered very heavy casualties, and Saddam Hussein did not care two hoots about these, didn't care a single thing about these Arab volunteers that came from other countries, and the Syrian government actively helped them with Syrian papers to go to Iraq. There are concerns that some of the Iraqi leadership may have found refuge in Iraq and in Syria. Sorry, that some of the Iraqi leadership might have found refuge in Syria. And I think there is a united view in the Arab world as well as abroad that the Iraqi people should be able to bring those who are responsible for the crimes of the Saddam Hussein regime to justice in Iraq. So these are concerns about the Syrian behavior in the last few weeks. But no one is threatening them with military action.
There's no intention of war against Syria.
No one is threatening. There is no intention of war against Syria, and no one is threatening Syria with military action.
So why the Syrian file is open now?
Well, I mean, because of what the Syrians have been doing in the last few weeks.
Only the last few weeks.
Yeah, well, there's the whole question that Syria, I think, is probably now the only Arab government that actively gives home to groups that most of us consider to be terrorist organizations, the ones who are letting off the suicide bombs to kill Israeli civilians and so on. Well, they're still giving house room to these people.
When you say most of us, it's relative how you interpret that.
Well, I know that some people believe that any action in promotion of the Palestinian cause is justified because of the Israeli occupation of the West Bank and Gaza.
Yeah.
My own view, and those I think of certainly all Western governments, and it's certainly shared by the Egyptian government and by most other governments in the Arab world, is that the Palestinian people have been wronged, that they face an injustice, but that it is just as wrong and just as unjust for their cause to be pursued by indiscriminate violence that leads to the death of innocent civilians.
Well, innocent civilians die in both cases, and how many Palestinian civilians die every day?
Absolutely, it's terrible.
Yeah.
The deaths in Palestine are absolutely terrible, and it just only underscores how important it is to get us back to a negotiation and a peace process between the Israelis and the Palestinians, so that finally we can work towards a just solution to that problem.
But the pressure on Syria now is also interpreted as some kind of Israeli pressure on the United States.
Well, and the Israelis have views on this in the same way that Egyptians have views on this, and Turks have views on this, and Jordanians and others have views on this. So it's not surprising that people are expressing their concerns.
But it's the reason of putting that pressure on Syria is direct Israeli pressure.
Oh, I don't think that's the case. I've just described to you what I think are the reasons for the concerns being expressed about Syria. It's about channeling Arab volunteers and sending them to their deaths, effectively, because they're putting innocent volunteers in the hands of Saddam Hussein. Secondly, it's about supplying military equipment to the Iraqis against UN sanctions. Thirdly, it's about providing possible refuge to former Iraqi leaders that need to be brought to justice. And there are some other concerns as well. These we are pursuing with the Syrians in private. We had a minister who saw President Bashar al-Assad last week, and it set out these concerns to him then. I know President Mubarak has just been to Syria. I do not know what he discussed, but I'm sure some of these issues were also on the agenda. We understand that Colin Powell, the US Secretary of State, is coming to the region in the next few days, and he will raise these concerns. It's right to engage the Syrians in these shared concerns about what is right, what is defensible, and what is not.
So you're negating or refuting the idea that there is a new world map or a new Middle East map is
There's
being
no Middle East map.
Drawn now.
I tell there's only one way we'd like to redraw the Middle East map, and that is to redraw the Middle East map, and that is to create an independent, viable Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza Strip.
Yeah.
That is the one redrawing we would like to see.
But not any other Arab countries.
No, we would like to see the Arab world become more modern, become more open societies, become more successful countries. I think, and I'm sure many of your...
We will say it's our own business.
Well, I'm sure many of your viewers on Dream TV will consider that the opportunities for young, skilled professionals to take part in business or politics are actually greater in other countries than they are here in the Middle East. That the Middle East has not seized the opportunity to push itself forward, like countries such as Poland or Mexico or Brazil or Malaysia or Turkey or Indonesia or Korea have done, South Korea have done in the last 20 years. The Middle East hasn't really changed in 20 years. It's got rather stuck.
Because of wars.
Well, there haven't been wars for 20 years.
More than 20 years.
Yeah.
We've been in war since 1948.
Well, there's been a conflict between the Palestinian people and the Israelis since 1948. The last actual war was in 1973, which is 30 years ago. What I'm saying is that in this period, the Middle East region has not progressed at the speed that other countries and other regions have done. We would like to see the Middle East fulfill its potential. And actually, the change in Iraq is an opportunity for the Arab world to show that those people here who say, oh, we Arabs are not, we're not ready for democracy, to show that they're wrong. I don't believe Arabs are not ready for democracy. I believe Arabs are just as ready for democracy as Asians and Europeans and Africans and Latin Americans are. It's just that they've not been allowed democracy.
Are we allowed to participate in the rebuilding of Iraq?
Absolutely. You'd be ahlan wa sahlan is what I would say. It would be extremely welcome to have more Arab hands taking part in this rebuilding.
If France is complaining about that, if France and Germany are complaining, and Russia...
I haven't heard any complaints from the Germans.
And Russia, that the Americans and the British are going to just have the whole cake for themselves.
There's no
and
cake.
Condoleezza Rice said, she said, we paid the money, we paid by in our blood. That's why we have to reap the results.
Well, I don't know what that context was that she was saying that.
Yeah.
The only contracts that have been let have been ones which have been paid for by American aid.
Yeah.
And they're subject to American aid rules, which you here in Egypt are very familiar with, because you are such generous beneficiaries from American aid. The rebuilding of Iraq will be in the hands of the Iraqi people. And the more Egyptians and Jordanians and Gulf Arabs that can take part in that, the better. And I think there is a big role for the Arab world to play in the rebuilding of Iraq. And the more that you can become involved, the better. The more hands to the pump, the better. And I hope that you and your viewers will encourage your government and those in other Arab countries to take part in the rebuilding of Iraq.
Absolutely. I think Arab countries would hope to participate in the rebuilding of Iraq, but there is this pessimism. We find France and Russia really don't want to...
What are France and Russia concerned about?
They are concerned about
oil contracts.
Oil.
And do you know what those contracts
were?
They
want the United Nations to supervise the sales of the Iraqi oil, so
they do
Britain and America don't really confiscate it.
Okay, let me tell you three things. First of all, the United Nations does supervise the sale of Iraqi oil, and there is no intervention from Britain and America. Secondly, both Russian companies, and I think also French companies, entered into long-term future arrangements illegally, contrary to United Nations sanctions, with the Saddam regime, and are now trying to uphold those as valid contracts. We believe that no decision should be made on this until a new Iraqi government is in place. The third thing I will say is that long-term contracts, long-term decisions about new investment in Iraqi oil resources will be left to a new and permanent Iraqi government and will not be taken in this interim provisional stage. So all those allegations about from Moscow and Paris and elsewhere about not being allowed to take part in Iraq's redevelopment means that it's those countries that want to be able to have validated illegal contracts about future investments that were made illegally by the Saddam regime during the period of UN sanctions.
Did the war in Iraq create some kind of breaking up in the European community?
There was a majority view and a minority view.
Yeah.
And the majority view, led by Britain and Spain and Italy and Poland and a very large number of other European countries, was that it was right for us to work with America to uphold UN Security Council resolutions and to make sure that the Middle East was a safer place and that if Saddam was not going to give up his weapons voluntarily, he should be forced to relinquish them. There was a minority view, most often associated with France and Germany and Belgium, which felt that even though the resolution had been passed, that more and more time should be allowed to implement it. Now, that view, it's a perfectly respectful view. I can understand it. Those who decided they don't want to implement resolutions, even though they voted for them. But it was not a majority view in Europe. Now, there is a question about the development of the European Union and a common European foreign and security policy. We've made a lot of progress in the last 20 years on this, and I think the common European effort on the Middle East peace process is a good example of that. The common European effort in the Balkans is a good example of that. But Europe is still made up of sovereign nations, and where we disagree, well, you're not going to get a common policy. So yes, there was a split on this issue, but it hasn't divided the European Union forever. It's divided it temporarily on one issue, and I think one of the really exciting events of the last few weeks was actually the signing ceremony in Athens last week of the accession treaty for 10 Central and Eastern European countries to join the European Union, enlarging the membership from 15 to 25.
Is Britain still cautious about really being involved completely in the European community? I mean, some countries like France and Germany, they are dealing with the euro now, and they gave up their currencies. Yeah. And Britain is insisting on the strength of the sterling.
Well, it's not quite true. Tony Blair has said that he believes there is a strong political case for Britain joining the euro, and that if the economic conditions are right, then he will recommend that we do join the euro. We are at the moment assessing those economic conditions. The British economy is different from the economies of France and Germany. It's more involved in financial services, big banking and insurance centres in London. There's a lot of involvement of the of oil and gas, because we're still a large oil producer from the North Sea. So we're subject to different pressures than the French and German economies. We're not entirely in synchronization with them. But the policy of the present government is that if the economic conditions are right, then we will join the euro.
There is this possibility.
I say it's the policy of the British government that we should do that.
But not changing the sterling into a dollar, into the dollar.
No, it will be changing. It will be getting rid of the sterling, and the euro would be the common currency in Britain. But this is a big step. It was a big step for any country to give up its currency. I mean, what would Egypt do if it was told that perhaps it should use Saudi riyals instead of Egyptian pounds?
I'm talking about an experience that happened already in Europe.
I know, exactly. And we're taking this decision country by country, and in Britain the decision will be made by a referendum of all the people on the basis of a recommendation by the government.
Mr. Ambassador, do you have any statistics about the costs of the war in Iraq?
I can't really help you on that, I'm afraid. I don't have any statistics to hand, no.
The cost of rebuilding Iraq?
Well,
some people said 800 milliard.
$800 billion.
Yeah,
well,
$800 billion.
Rebuilding it from what? From the devastation that Saddam Hussein has wreaked of it over the last 25 years? Probably be more than that.
It will be more.
More to make good the devastation that Saddam Hussein has brought about in Iraq.
And the war?
Well, I think the war is a small element of that.
With all the destruction?
The person that destroyed Iraq is Saddam Hussein. He's destroyed it systematically over 25 years by refusing, by involving his country in 3 different wars, and by failing to invest in the development of his own country, even though it is traditionally the best educated and best resourced country in the Arab world.
But we cannot deny that the war caused a lot of destruction in Iraq.
Nothing like as much destruction as Saddam Hussein has caused in his country.
Infrastructure was ruined.
And if Saddam Hussein had had his way, the entire oil infrastructure of his own country would have been destroyed in this war. We managed to stop him doing that. We've preserved that oil infrastructure for his own people.
Will countries that oppose the war in Iraq have some share in rebuilding Iraq?
Everyone has a share in rebuilding Iraq. And everyone has a responsibility to help in rebuilding Iraq.
Some French companies, big corporations, made meetings and conferences, and they sent, they addressed America and Britain, and they said, you can criticize France as you want, but please don't let the French companies pay the price. Let's get us into this project of rebuilding Iraq?
You should ask the French or others about that. I've got nothing to comment on that.
But do you think they will be allowed to
Everyone can compete for...
to have a share in
Everyone
rebuilding?
can compete in this. It's not a question of sharing it out. It's a question of getting the best possible value for money for the Iraqi people.
When are we going to see an Iraqi government?
Well,
How soon?
I think we've gone over this ground, as I say.
How soon?
In the next month or so, we would hope to see an Iraqi interim administration launched, and then there would follow a constitutional conference, and after that we would see that constitution decided upon, confirmed by the Iraqi people, and a new government elected. I can't put a firm timeline on that. It will take months. I don't believe it will take years.
Another question?
Last one, maybe?
Not really. A few more questions. The Israeli spokesman said that without Iraq, we could not have an Arab front on our eastern borders.
I can't comment on what Israeli spokesmen say. I can comment on what British spokesmen say.
He said the war, because you had share in the war in Iraq, he said the war on Iraq helped Israel to be superior, to be more superior in the Middle East. Was this war in any way big service to Israel?
Well, I think what we will see now is that with the threat from Iraq removed, and hopefully a new and more open and more neighborly Iraqi government being elected, attention will turn to what I think is the most important issue in the region, which is a just solution to the Palestinian question. On that, the Israeli government holds most of the cards, and they will come under pressure to negotiate a fair solution along the lines being proposed back in the year 2000 by President Clinton and Ehud Barak, and I believe that that would form the basis for a durable solution. It was a pity the Palestinians were not in a position to go firm on that at the time, but there was the basis laid then for a durable solution. I think that will be in everybody's interests. It will be in the interest of the Palestinian people, the interest of the Israeli people. It will be interest in all the countries that border, all the nations that border the border historic Palestine.
There are some fears that Iraq will be some kind of American or Israeli colony.
How can Iraq possibly be an Israeli colony?
There are some fears in the Arab world.
How can it possibly be?
That
these are just imaginations. How can it possibly be? If Iraq is a democratic country, the people of Iraq will decide who its government is, what its relations are with other countries.
Certainly hope so.
Well, of course. Well, that's what I'm saying. This will happen. Look, you don't actually have to believe me. All you have to do is watch our actions, watch what we do.
Yeah.
And if the Arab world had the confidence to take part in this process, to work with emerging Iraqi politicians, then whatever fears you may have, and however unlikely those fears, they would soon be allayed.
So, thank you very much for this very, very interesting interview, Your Excellency. And I hope that we give our viewers some of the truth, if not all the truth.
Well, Halla, I've certainly tried to be as truthful and as frank and as open as possible with you. I'm not sure how many of your viewers survived a whole hour and a half of our interview, but it's been a great pleasure talking to you and a great pleasure appearing on Dream TV. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your
Thank you.
المصري